The night it happened wasn't some major anniversary, or a dramatic confrontation, or anything that might have warned me I was about to burn everything down with a sentence. It was a regular Saturday, and our friends, the kind you only really see during birthdays and backyard cookouts, had thrown this rooftop party downtown, complete with fairy lights, catered sliders, and an open bar that I hit a little harder than I meant to. Jared came with me, reluctantly, of course, because parties weren't really his thing, and I'd practically begged him to come out for once instead of sitting at home with his Sudoku puzzles and those documentaries about civil infrastructure that somehow didn't put him to sleep. I'd promised we'd only stay an hour or two, just enough to show face, have a few drinks, maybe dance a little if the vibe was right. That was my first lie of the night, because once we got there, and the drinks started flowing, and the music was good, and people kept asking me questions and laughing at my answers, I forgot all about Jared, forgot he was even there half the time, standing a few feet behind me like someone's awkward cousin no one invited, but no one had the heart to kick out. He was leaning against a patio heater when I cracked the joke. God. Even now I wish I could reach into my own mouth and pull those words back like they were poison, and I still don't know what I was trying to prove or who I was trying to impress. Maybe it was my friend Ava, who had just finished telling the story about how her boyfriend surprised her with plane tickets to Croatia, or maybe it was one of the guys in the circle, laughing a little too hard at everything I said and brushing his hand against mine more times than was accidental. Whatever it was, I heard the words come out of my mouth before I could stop them. I said, "Honestly, Jared's just kind of boring. Like, I love him, but he's the guy who thinks a wild night out is watching planet Earth with the lights off." People laughed, not the uncomfortable kind, not yet, and I followed it up because I always doubled down when I was nervous. I swear, if we were characters in a movie, he'd be the background guy they cut out of the final edit. Like, you'd blink and miss him. But hey, someone's gotta be the safe option, right? I remember the way the laughter rippled, too quick and too loud, like it echoed off the exposed brick walls. I remember how I kept smiling through it like it was all just in good fun, like my face wasn't already burning and my chest wasn't tightening because I knew deep down, somewhere under the buzz, that I'd gone too far. I remember the moment he turned around, slow and deliberate, like he wasn't sure he heard me right, and how his eyes found mine through the crowd. Not angry, not shocked, just hurt. Like I'd just confirmed something he'd always suspected about how I saw him. He didn't say anything. He didn't pull me aside. He didn't make a scene. He just put his drink down on the edge of the planter beside him, nodded once, and walked through the rooftop doors like he was stepping out for air, but I knew, deep in my stomach, he wasn't coming back. I tried to play it off, even as my laughter turned hollow, and I could feel the way the group shifted, like everyone suddenly became aware of what I'd said, what I'd done. Ava raised her brows at me like she wasn't sure if I was serious, and one of the guys, maybe the same one who had brushed my hand, made a half-hearted joke about Jared probably being halfway home already, and I forced another laugh and waved it off like he was being dramatic. But I was already checking my phone every few seconds, and I don't even remember the rest of the conversations because my head was filled with the sound of that joke echoing back at me, over and over, louder each time. By the time I got home, he was gone. Not in the dramatic, suitcase on the bed kind of way, but in the quiet, careful kind of way that told me he'd been thinking about leaving long before I gave him the reason. His jacket was missing, the keys from the hook were gone, and our dog's leash was still hanging there untouched, which meant he didn't even take Pepper. He didn't leave a note, didn't text, didn't slam the door, just silence. That kind of silence that makes you sit down in the kitchen with your shoes still on and your lipstick smudged, wondering if you're the villain in your own story. I didn't call him that night. I didn't want to be the one to blink first, still drunk on cheap wine and pride. Instead, I poured another glass, sat on the floor, and told myself it wasn't that serious. That he'd come home tomorrow, maybe mad, maybe cold, but still Jared. Always Jared. Always coming back. Except this time, he didn't. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I noticed was that his side of the bed hadn't been touched. The sheets were still tucked in, his pillows still perfectly in place, and there was a silence in the apartment that didn't feel like sleep or rest, but something else entirely. I sat up and stared at the door for a long time, half expecting it to open any second, but it didn't. I checked my phone. No texts, no missed calls, no notifications, just the same useless apps and old photos of us from hikes and movie nights, and the time he fixed my broken chair like it was the most important job in the world. I sat there for a while trying to decide if I should call him, but I didn't. I couldn't figure out how to start a conversation that didn't make me look either pathetic or defensive, and I didn't want to be either of those things yet. I made coffee and sat by the window like I always did. Only this time it felt like I was pretending to live a life that wasn't mine anymore. I kept checking my phone, even though I told myself I wouldn't. I scrolled through his Instagram, even though I knew he rarely posted, just to feel like I was still close to him. And when the hours passed and he still hadn't reached out, I did what I always do when I don't want to deal with something. I called my sister. "Let me guess," she said, "not even a hello. You said something stupid again." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the wall. I didn't mean to. It just came out. "You called your boyfriend boring in front of a room full of people, Kayla." That doesn't just come out. He's not just my boyfriend. We've been together for 7 years. "That makes it worse," she said. "You should know better by now." There was a pause, the kind where I knew she was trying not to say what she really thought. I didn't feel it because I already knew what she was thinking, and hearing it out loud would only make everything worse. I waited for her to tell me I needed to apologize, to reach out, to explain, but instead, she said something else. "Has it really been that bad between you two? Or are you just bored with yourself?" That hit harder than I expected, and I didn't respond. She waited, probably listening to me breathe through the phone, but I didn't have an answer for her. I ended the call not long after, told her I needed to think, and then sat in the kitchen for what felt like an entire day without moving. Around 5 in the evening, I finally caved and texted him. It wasn't even an apology. Just a simple "Are you okay?
Can we talk?" He didn't respond.
That night, I tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV and let some cooking show play in the background while I scrolled through old texts. I read messages he'd sent me from months ago, boring little things like what time he'd be home or could I grab milk if I passed the store, but somehow those tiny messages felt heavier than anything I'd ever written to him. They felt real.
Honest.
Uncomplicated. And now I couldn't even get a one-word reply from him. The second night was worse. The silence wasn't just in the apartment anymore. It was in my chest. I couldn't sleep. I walked around the living room at 2 in the morning, opening drawers like I'd find him inside them. I considered driving around to see if maybe he was staying with someone we both knew, but I didn't even know where to start. His best friend Nick had moved to another state, and his coworkers weren't the kind he'd confide in. He didn't have family nearby. If he didn't want to be found, I wasn't going to find him. By the third day, people started asking questions. Marissa texted me to ask if everything was okay. She said she noticed something fell off at the party after Jared left, and she just wanted to check in. I lied and said we were just having a small disagreement, nothing serious, and that he was staying with a friend for a few days to cool off. She sent me a heart emoji and told me she hoped things would work out. I didn't respond because I didn't believe it myself. I didn't go into the studio that week. I canceled 2 engagement shoots and told my clients I was sick, and then spent the rest of the time in the apartment doing nothing. I didn't clean, didn't cook, didn't even shower until Thursday, when I looked at myself in the mirror and realized I hadn't seen that version of me in years. The one with puffy eyes, hair tied up carelessly, shirt stained with coffee, and a blank stare like she didn't belong anywhere. On Friday, my friend Megan stopped by unannounced. She knocked twice and then used the spare key I'd forgotten she still had. She walked in, took one look at me, and dropped her purse on the floor. "What the hell happened to you?" I shrugged and curled deeper into the couch. "He's gone. I don't know where. He won't answer." She sat beside me, didn't say anything for a minute, and then picked up my phone from the coffee table. "You've been texting him?" "A couple times." She scrolled. "You didn't even say you were sorry." I pulled the blanket tighter around my legs. "I don't want to apologize for a joke." "It wasn't a joke. It was mean." "I didn't mean it like that." "That doesn't matter." I looked at her, not angry, just exhausted. "Then what do I say?" She put the phone down. "Something real. Something you don't want to say." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. I didn't write him some long dramatic message. I didn't send a paragraph full of feelings or an apology wrapped in memories. I sent exactly what Megan told me to write. I'm not proud of what I said. You didn't deserve it. If you want to talk, I'm here. That was it. I stared at it for a good 20 minutes before I hit send. Then I turned my phone off, not on silent, not on airplane mode, just off because I didn't want to know if he read it or ignored it or if he'd finally decided that was enough and he was done for good. I spent the night on the couch again, not even pretending to sleep this time, just laying there with a pillow hugged against my chest like it was going to say something back. He showed up the next morning. I heard the key in the door and sat up fast enough that I knocked over the glass of water next to me, and by the time I stood and wiped my hands on my shirt, he was already walking in like he wasn't sure he was supposed to. He looked tired. Not like he hadn't slept, but like someone who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and didn't know where to put it down. He didn't say anything at first. He looked around, maybe to see if anyone else was there, maybe to check if the place looked different. I didn't move. I waited. He closed the door behind him, walked to the edge of the living room, and stopped just short of the rug. I got your text, he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. He looked like he had more to say, but the space between us held it back. You meant it. I did, I said, and I made sure I looked at him when I said it. I know it doesn't fix anything. I just needed to say it. He exhaled, long and slow, then scratched at the back of his neck the way he always did when he was trying not to say something that might start a fight. I didn't leave because you embarrassed me. I've been embarrassed before. I left because I realized in that moment, standing there while people laughed, that maybe that's really how you see me. Not just in the joke, but in general. Like I'm some default choice. Like I'm safe but not wanted. That's not true. You didn't even hesitate, Kayla. You said it so casually. And it wasn't even just what you said. It was the way you looked proud after, like being with someone like me was something you were tolerating. I took a step closer, but didn't touch him. I was trying to be funny. That doesn't make it better, I know. But I didn't think it through. You've been pulling away for a while. I'm not stupid. I noticed. The comments, the way you look at me sometimes, like you're waiting for me to change into someone else. I shook my head not because he was wrong, but because I hated how right he was. I never wanted someone else. I don't know what I wanted. I think I got caught up in feeling like I wasn't enough, and instead of dealing with that, I turned it into something about you. He nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was just acknowledgement, like he heard me but didn't know what to do with it. I stayed with Nick the first night, he said. Then with my cousin. I needed space. I needed to figure out if I was holding on to something that didn't exist anymore. I didn't stop loving you, but you stopped respecting me. That hit harder than anything else he could have said, and I didn't have a response because I couldn't lie to his face. I had chipped away at him piece by piece. The looks, the jokes, the comments passed off as harmless observations, and I told myself he could take it, that he'd always be there, that nothing I did would ever actually make him leave. I don't want to be the guy you're stuck with because I'm good at remembering birthdays and doing the dishes. I want to be the person you still choose. Not someone you talk about like a utility. You were never that, I said, and my voice cracked without warning. You were the first thing in my life that felt steady. I just didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to not ruin something that was working. He sat down on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. I stayed standing. I used to think you were out of my league, he said. Not because of how you look or what you do, but because of how you made life feel different. Lighter. I thought I was the one getting lucky. You still are, I said. You just picked someone who forgot what she had. We sat in silence for a long time, not angry, not relieved, just quiet. Eventually, he looked up at me. I don't know if I'm coming back yet. I know. I need more than words this time. I know that too. I don't want to hear how sorry you are if nothing's going to change. Then I won't say it again. He nodded and stood up. I thought maybe he'd hug me or touch my hand or say something to end the moment cleanly, but he didn't. He just walked to the door, paused, and looked over his shoulder. I'll call you. And then he was gone again. Only this time, I didn't pretend like it wasn't serious.
He didn't call.
Not the next day, not the one after that, not even a message to say he needed more time. The silence stretched until it didn't feel like space anymore. It felt like a choice. I kept telling myself he was still thinking, that maybe he just didn't know what to say or how to say it, but after the first week passed, I started checking his social media. He hadn't posted anything new, but I noticed he had removed the picture of us from his profile, the one we took last fall in that little cabin upstate. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my stomach twist. I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't text him again. I told myself I wouldn't be the one to chase this time, that if he wanted distance, I'd give it to him. But it wasn't just distance anymore. It was absence. And that did something to me. I found out where he was through Ava, who didn't even realize she was telling me. We were having lunch, and she mentioned she'd run into Jared at a new bar downtown last Friday. She said it like it was nothing. Said he looked good, seemed relaxed, was with a group of people she didn't know. I nodded like it didn't bother me, but my jaw clenched so hard I gave myself a headache. I didn't ask if he was with a woman.
I didn't want her to lie.
I waited until I got home, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my phone for almost an hour. Then I opened my camera roll, scrolled until I found an old picture I'd taken of myself that I never posted, the kind of photo that's meant to be seen but not explained. I uploaded it to my story with no caption. Within minutes, I had replies. Some from guys I hadn't spoken to in years, some from people I didn't even follow. I ignored them all except one. His name was Noah. We used to work together on a wedding shoot 2 years ago. We flirted then, but it never went anywhere. He lived in the city now. He'd replied to my story with one word. Wow. I waited 10 minutes before replying. We talked for an hour. He was funny, sharp, easy to talk to. I didn't tell him I was going through a breakup. I didn't tell him anything about Jared. I just let myself feel wanted again, even if it was only through a screen. By the end of the conversation, he asked if I wanted to grab a drink sometime. I said maybe. The next night, I said yes. It wasn't a date. At least, that's what I told myself when I stood in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear. It wasn't a date when I spent extra time on my hair, or when I changed my lipstick 3 times. It wasn't a date when I ordered a second drink and laughed louder than I needed to. It only became a date when Noah leaned in near the end of the night and said, "I always wondered what it would be like to take you out." I didn't stop him when he put his hand on my knee. I didn't move away when he walked me to my car and lingered a little too close. I didn't invite him in, but I didn't make it hard for him to ask. The next day, I sent Jared a message. I didn't write anything emotional. I didn't ask how he was. I just said I saw Ava. She said you've been going out a lot. Glad you're doing well.
It was petty.
I knew it was. I wanted a reaction. I wanted to remind him that I wasn't just sitting at home waiting. I wanted him to feel what I felt when Ava told me he looked happy without me. He didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next. Noah texted me again. I didn't ignore it. By the end of the week, we'd been out twice more. The second time, he kissed me. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. But I let it happen. I let it happen because I wanted to know what it felt like to be wanted by someone who hadn't seen me make a fool of myself. I wanted to know if I could still be someone new to someone. I wanted to punish Jared for not calling. I didn't tell anyone about Noah. Not Megan, not my sister, not even Ava.
It wasn't about them.
It was about the small sense of control I felt in knowing Jared could come back and I wouldn't be waiting empty. But the problem with trying to get revenge on someone who's gone is that they're not around to see it. And the more time passed, the more I realized he might not come back at all. Then came the night I found out he'd blocked me. It was subtle. I tried to message him something, not even something angry, just a picture of Pepper curled up in his old hoodie, and it didn't go through. I checked the settings. Checked again. Then I called. Straight to voicemail. I opened Instagram. His name didn't appear when I searched. I used my sister's phone and searched from her account. There he was. Same profile. Different life. He wasn't just ignoring me. He'd erased me. I sat on the floor of my bedroom for a long time after that. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I just felt stupid. Not because I'd gone out with Noah. Not because I'd sent that message. But because I thought I had any control over how this ended. I thought I could steer the damage. I thought if I could make Jared feel what I felt, it would balance things. But it didn't. It just made me feel emptier. It had been almost a month since the party. I hadn't seen Jared since he stood in the doorway and told me he didn't know if he was coming back. Since then, I had lived every day like I was waiting for something specific to happen, like he might change his mind, like I might get a knock at the door or a message saying he was ready to talk again. But every day passed exactly the same. No calls. No messages. No sign that he even existed in the same city. The apartment started to feel like a museum of a relationship I'd already lost, and I couldn't even pretend it was temporary anymore. The shoes he left were still by the door, untouched. The gray hoodie he always wore when it rained still hung by the coat rack. I couldn't bring myself to move them, because moving them meant admitting he wasn't coming back, and I hadn't been ready for that yet. That morning, I checked the mail like I always did, even though I usually tossed most of it in the bin. There was a small, white envelope with no return address. I opened it without thinking, assuming it was something about a bill or a neighbor notice, but inside was a handwritten note in Jared's familiar, careful handwriting. It wasn't long. Just one sentence. "You don't need to keep pretending like I'll walk through the door." That was all it said. No signature. No explanation. I stood in the hallway holding that note until my fingers hurt from how tightly I was gripping it. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just walked to the kitchen, sat down, and placed the note on the table. I called Megan. I didn't even say hello.
"He sent me a note," I said.
What did it say? I read it out loud. There was silence on the other end. "So that's it then?" I added. "Do you want it to be?" I didn't answer right away. I picked at a chipped edge of the table and thought about everything I had done since that night. "I think I already ruined it." "I think you did too," she said, and her voice didn't have any softness in it. She wasn't trying to make me feel better anymore. I thought about telling her about Noah. I thought about explaining why I did it, how it had nothing to do with love and everything to do with control. But what was the point? Jared wasn't coming back, and telling Megan wouldn't change that. All it would do is make me sound like I was still trying to win something, like I was still keeping score in a game where I was the only one still playing. Later that afternoon, I packed up the rest of his stuff. I didn't do it angrily. I didn't play sad music or cry into his old t-shirts. I folded everything neatly, put it all into a box, and wrote his name on top with a black marker. I didn't know where I would send it yet, but it felt like the right thing to do. I placed the box in the hallway, away from sight. The apartment looked cleaner after that. Not better. Just emptier in a way that made sense. That night, I sat down at my laptop and opened the photo editing software I hadn't touched in weeks. I went through the folders of recent shoots and finally responded to 2 clients I'd been ignoring. I apologized for the delay and promised to deliver their galleries within the week. They both replied with something polite. I started editing one of the weddings, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel the constant weight behind my eyes. It didn't mean anything was fixed, but at least I was moving. I heard from Noah once more. He sent a message asking if I wanted to go out again. I stared at it for a long time and then deleted the conversation. Not because I hated him, not because I felt guilty, but because I knew now that none of it mattered. He wasn't a solution to anything. He was just something I used to feel less ignored, and all it did was make me feel worse. A week later, I saw Jared in the grocery store. I hadn't expected it. I was standing in the fruit aisle comparing apples, and when I looked up, he was standing near the bananas, scanning a list on his phone. He didn't see me. He looked the same, quiet, focused, calm. I froze. I didn't walk over. I didn't call his name. I stood there for a moment too long, then turned around and walked in the other direction. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't shaking. I just knew there was nothing left to say that would change what had already happened. When I got home, I sat on the couch and stared out the window for a while. I thought about the party again. I thought about the exact moment the words left my mouth, the way I smiled like it was harmless, like I hadn't just thrown a grenade into something that took years to build. I had tried to be funny. I had tried to be interesting. But all I did was show him he was someone I could mock when I felt restless, someone I could cut down when I needed attention. And the worst part wasn't that I lost him. It was that I did it so easily. So quickly. Like it didn't mean anything. But it did. It meant everything. And now it's gone.